This is a quick video demonstration of how a game of Felithian Finance would be played. Felithian Finance is a game designed by Tom Wham and published by Tom Wham Games. It is a game of corporate greed for 2 to 7 players and should take around an hour or so to play. The description of the game is: in a Felithian system in a far away galaxy, domestic doppels and robotic fish are in high demand. In short, things are very different, but we won't go into that right now. Suffice it to say that what you're about to see is an exact simulation of how corporate finance works in that galaxy. Felithian Finance is a game of stock accumulation coupled by a 6x6 grid upon which corporate markers are played. By judiciously playing tiles, players can augment the value of the corporations they control and thwart the growth of the holdings of others. Dice are rolled to determine if dividends are played. Eventually the game comes to an end and the player with the most galactic credits or money is the winner. So I have a sample of the game set up. The tokens that are used to place on the board. I've got 3 players set up as around the board. Some cards are played in front of you, some cards are in a hand. I'll get into that in a second. So in general, the game starts with each player having about 4 cards that are hidden in their hand. Cards are made up of either stock cards like these that you're seeing. There are 10 cards of each stock, and there are 10 different stocks in the game. Asgorian acknowledgements, Tugorian tugzoids, and domestic doppels are 3 of those cards. So that adds up to 100 cards, plus there are several other types of cards in the game called stock manipulation cards. Those will allow you to manipulate dice rolls, which I'll explain more in a bit. Cards that are in your hand will always stay in your hand. So this player has these cards sitting in their hand. No other player will know what they have in their hand until a card is laid down, if the player chooses to do that, or such as playing a card like the stock manipulation card, or these other stock cards can remain in your hand hidden throughout the whole game until the scoring round at the very end. That way players will not know what you have for your stock accumulation, how much you own of each company, or even for that matter, how many shares of stock are out on the board in the game right now. So the way it's played is during your turn, you would draw a card, and you can draw from either the cards that are laid up, and in that case, you would purchase those cards for the value that they are on the stock board, and you track the value of shares of stock on this market price board. So if somebody were, for example, to want to buy the Asgorian acknowledgement stock card that's on the board, you can see that that stock value was 80. So if somebody wanted to buy and take as their draw for the beginning of the turn that Asgorian acknowledgement card, they'd have to pay 80 credits to get it. The doppel goes currently for 60, so those would each cost 60. You can only buy 1 at a time. These cards, the indecencies are not on the board. That would cost 10. There's a minimum of 10. There is 1 of those on the board, also costing 10. And the stock manipulation cards are show the cost on the card. Stock manipulation cards come in a value of either 1, 2, or 3, and they cost accordingly. So 10 for 1, 20 for 2, and 30 for 3. Or if you don't like any of the cards that are face up, you can always draw the card on the top of the deck for a cost of 10. So you start your turn by drawing a card, and then, and whenever you draw a face down card, it always goes into your hand face down. Nobody knows what that is. If you buy a face up card, it always stays face up. So you'll see that some cards in front of the 3 different players in this game are face up cards in front of them, along with the hands that they have. So after you draw your card, you get to play a token on the board. These tokens represent the companies. Again, there are 10 tokens for each company, and you can play any token at any time. Does not have to relate to the card that you drew or cards that you have, for that matter. Generally speaking, you want to play the ones that you have most control over. So speaking of that, let's look at the cards that this player has. So this player has 1 Weedle, 2 Tugzoids, 1 Zoo, 2 Wineries, and a bunch of Doppels. These have to stay face up because those were face up, so this is in his hand. So this person obviously has a lot of control over the domestic Doppels. It's 3 hidden in his hand, plus 2 showing on the board. So that person is in control of the domestic Doppel company. So they're likely going to be the ones wanting to play the Doppel company out on the board. Now again, this player could have bought yet another one, but because they're available on the face-up cards, but those would cost that person 60 credits, and they wanted to save their money. So instead, they're paying 10 to draw a face-up card, which in this case again is hidden, and they get a good deal. Hidden in their hand, they get a card costing 10 that is worth 90. So that's a great deal. So playing the tile. So after you draw, you play a tile. In this case, you play the tile anywhere on the board, but ideally you want to position the tiles that get played to be adjacent, orthogonally adjacent to others of its kind. The value of that stock price goes up when you do so. So right now, you can see that the stock price of the domestic Doppel is at 60. You calculate that by looking at the tiles that are on the board already, and that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them, all of them not orthogonally touching one another. So there are none that are orthogonally touching. So each one of those 6 is worth 10 credits each, thus the stock price of 60. However, if you were to, and then in this case, this player would be wise to place the next one in between some of the others, and the price when that happens gets recalculated whenever you play a new tile on the board. Now any tiles that are orthogonally adjacent to one another, meaning side by side or above and below, not diagonal. Those tiles are now worth a value of 20 each instead of 10 each. So the value of this company by playing that one tile would jump from 60 to a total of 5 times 2, which is 100, plus 10 and 20 more. So it doubled in value from 60 all the way up to 120 by a playing of a single tile. In addition to that, the person who played the tile would get the value in credits in their hand of the number that the tile goes down onto. So in that case, this player would have earned 5 credits in addition to changing the value of that stock. So that's how you check the value of a stock. That's how you play on the board and how you earn money. So that is playing that tile down and earning that money, in this case only 5 credits. That is the only way that you earn money in this game. You will never earn anything else in the game in order to buy other things with, except by playing things on the board like that. So then, once you play your thing on the board, the tile, whatever tile you wish, and adjust the stock market, then you roll the dice, and you roll, in this case, the black die is, the black die is a 5, and the white die is a 5, and you marry those up to the intersection of those, and whatever company you hit, which in this case, a very fortunate roll for this player, the company that it lands on, if it lands on a company, gets to earn a dividend. If it lands on a space that's not occupied by a company, then nothing happens and you move on to the next phase of the game. But in this case, since there is a company there, that company gets a dividend. It's the player who rolled the dice that will decide how big of a dividend it is. In this case, it's not going to be a challenge determining that, because the way you calculate it is by taking the number of orthogonally adjacent tiles that is adjacent to the one that you hit. So in this case, that are all connected. In this case, this one is connected orthogonally to all 5 of these, not to the 2 that are down below it. So in this case, you have 5 pieces of the company, and you take that 5 and multiply it by one of the 2 dice. You can choose either the black die or the white die. In this case, it's the same number, so the person is going to earn 5 times the number of tiles times 5 on the die is 25 credits that then go into the dividend pile for the doppelgangers, or doppels. If, for example, let's just say this was a 5 and this one was a 3 and it hit this number instead, if I were not the player that controlled the doppels, then I would not want them to have a dividend. I wouldn't want them to have a dividend at all, but I have to give them a dividend. So I would choose the smaller of the dice, so it would be 5 of the tiles, 5 tiles, times the smaller number, 3, to earn a $15 credit instead of a $25 credit. So the numbers on the board are going to be the multipliers of dividends. That is also why the board is set up the way it is, with the larger numbers on the board. The sixes will only pay a player when they play in these spaces down here a smaller amount of money, 10 or 20, compared to all the way up here at the 1-1. When somebody played this Tugzoid tile, they earned 60 credits just for putting that tile down. However, you know, if somebody, even if there's multiples Tugzoids adjacent to one another, you're going to have a small die roll that you're multiplying against. So there's from a dividend perspective, there's a disadvantage to being in the upper left corner of the board versus the lower right corner of the board. So once the dividend is paid, then the turn is over and it passes on to the next player. So the game continues. Oh, and I'm sorry, there's one other thing. So let me explain the stock manipulation card. If I had rolled a 2-5 instead of what I had rolled, my stock manipulation card allows me to manipulate one of the 2 dice by whatever the value is on the card during this phase of the game. So in this case, I would have rolled the dice and missed completely, but since my controlling company is only 1 space away, I can manipulate this die to a 3, shifting the target down and hitting the Doppel company, again, making it pay dividends. And as the controller, I would choose the larger die to manipulate, or not to manipulate, but to pay. So I would earn 25 credits again as into the Doppel company. Dividends will get paid at the end of the game. They become the equivalent of additional value to the shares of stock at the end of the game when you're calculating money value that you have, total assets that you control. So the game is played until either one of 2 conditions apply. One of those is all 10 of the company tiles are out for any one company, or the whole board, all of the spaces on the board are full. One of those conditions will end the game. At that time, then you get rid of all of the extra cards in your hand that don't have a value. So in this case, this player has cards that have a value. These cards are not out on the board at all right now. So if the game was ending, these cards would all be wasted cards, because none of them have a representation on the board, which means none of them have a stock value. So in this case, this person would be collecting and ending the game with these cards that would have a value. So you just discard all these cards and put them into the discard pile and get them out of your way. Then you would go through and pay out dividends according to whatever has been accumulated throughout the play of the game. And each player would earn that number of dividends. So in this case, the acknowledgements have a $12 dividend. That means that this person would get 24 additional credits because they have 2 acknowledgements. In addition to that, those cards the company is worth 80. So a total of 80 plus 12, or 92 credits times 2, because this person has 2 shares. So this person would earn 184 credits, getting that in cash with the paper money that we have in the game, and then move on to the next player and calculate theirs. So you do that for all players at the end of the game, paying out credits to for all of the companies that you own. And then it's a showdown. You figure out who has the most money, and the person with the most money wins the game. This game is going into a crowd sale with GameCrafter at the first week of March. If you are interested, please take a look and support the Tom Wham Games by its purchase. We hope you have fun with it. It's been a favorite of Tom Wham fans for some time now, and we're finally getting it out as a published game. We're happy that that is the case. Enjoy it, and thank you very much for listening.